There's been some important news that has come out this morning, and thank you to those members who spotted it quickly and shared it with me so that we could begin to talk about it in early days. I want to share with you an article, and then we're going to get into how to deal with this if it's relevant to you. So, the take home message of this article is that the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, is banning BetterHelp. And I'm sure this will extend well beyond BetterHelp to similar tech companies in the medical field, right? From revealing consumer data, including sensitive mental health information, to Facebook and other advertisers for targeted advertising. So, something that we've talked about in the past, and I'm going to unshare this. This article is all over the news. It's been covered by many, many outlets. So, you can find it in lots of places. And I'm going to ask you right now, as you're listening, to please not comment anything that will put yourself or me at risk for any sort of legal follow up. So, comments to yourself if there's any chance, right? I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want you to get in trouble. I am being very careful to make sure that I'm sharing only the things that are in the news without adding my 2 cents. I'd appreciate it if you do the same. And related to that, I am requesting that you do not talk smack about therapists who have partnered with big tech companies thus far. You don't know anybody's situation. As someone brought up earlier, 2020 in particular was a very scary time for all of us, and in particular for people who were running their own businesses. So we're just not going to talk smack. We are going to talk facts only. If you're just joining now, please do be careful not to comment in any way that could put yourself or me at risk for legal action. So I want to highlight for you this article that has come out. It's in lots of sources right now that is talking about the FTC and them having looked into BetterHelp, and it will be many other sorts of companies like this for revealing consumer data, including sensitive mental health information to Facebook and other advertisers for targeted advertising. What I did is I went to the source material here because we're going to read different things from different outlets, and I'd rather just know exactly what the FTC is saying. So you can find this on their website, and I put that website right down here. So, in part of that, they will be required to pay $7.8 million for deceiving customers or consumers about promising to keep sensitive personal data private. And what seems to happen is that when you sign up for a service like this, you need to fill out as a consumer not only your name and your address and your email and all of this various identifying information, but also some really private mental health information, like the last time you felt depressed or if you've been suicidal recently. And the combination of identifying data and personal health information makes it PHI. So we know as therapists that we have to be really careful about that. And I would like to point out here, pausing to check in with myself. Nope, not even going to go down that bunny trail. What I want to make easy for you today is if you have partnered with any sort of tech company, that you are able to easily leave if you want to. So we're going to walk through the steps of what you need in order to set up your own therapy practice. If you're like, woohoo, didn't realize this was going on, I need to separate myself from whoever the tech company happens to be. I have lots and lots of thoughts about this that I'm going to keep to myself. And we're just going to talk about how to extricate yourself. So if you're reading the news and you're thinking, wow, I didn't realize that was happening, or I didn't look closely at the terms and services to realize that this was happening, and I don't want to be held accountable in any way for participating in this, let's get you out if you want to be out. So the number one, let's just walk through what you're going to need to be able to extricate yourself and move into a private practice. Number one to keep in mind is that you should look at your contract with that company, because most of them allow for you to do what our ethics tell us to do, which is as you're leaving a place, whether it's a group practice or a tech company or whatever it happens to be, they might have no compete clauses that tell you that you're not supposed to take people with you. But in most cases, what they're really looking for is that you're not trying to, swoop in and take the clients that they've spent a lot of time and advertising dollars to bring in. However, our ethics supersede in many cases like these kind of businessy deals, and our ethics say that you're supposed to provide continuity of care and that you're supposed to make the best clinical decisions for your clients. So when it comes down to it, people that I have coached who've been in these situations, even when there are no compete clauses, when they talk directly with the group practice or the tech company, there are caveats and loopholes to to be able to talk with your clients about all the options. So we're not poaching, you're talking about all the options available to the client. So for example, you might be able to say, pending reading your contract, things like, I'm going to be leaving this company, and I want to make sure that you know all the options available to you. You can continue with me in my private practice. You can continue with this company and get matched with a different therapist. You could also go your own total way and utilize a resource like Psychology Today or Therapy for Black Girls, one of these directories, to be able to be matched with a therapist. So there are lots of options available to you, and we can talk through the pros and cons of each. Tell me what your gut's telling you. Let's talk about it. Okay. Most of these contracts will allow for you to have those kinds of ethical and clinically sound discussions. And if you're reading the contract in such a way that it doesn't seem like that's possible, I really would encourage you to talk directly with either the company or the group practice owner, because most of the time these folks are reasonable. They don't want clients to suffer. And they put this policy in place as a broad protection strategy, and usually in your individual situations there's room to flex. So what I found in my coaching is that more than 50% of people, more, and I'm being like real conservative with that estimate, will continue with their therapist. The person they feel allegiance to, the person they've built trust with, is the therapist, not a particular company or a particular group practice. And they want to continue doing the work with that person. We can talk in detail about how to practically make that transition. I think I'm going to have a mini course come out about that. If that might be useful for folks, just put it in the chat if it might be useful for you, because obviously I don't want to make it if it's not going to be useful. If you need some help thinking through like, all right, but how do I make that transition financially? We're going to talk through the practical stuff today. So number one, check that contract. Number two, if the contract says that you're not allowed to take clients with you, have individual conversations with whoever your boss, manager, person is, because in almost all situations, I actually haven't come across one yet where you cannot have a clinically sound discussion with your client about what the right next steps might be for them. Come from a heart of service, don't come from a heart of selfishness. And almost always what I'm seeing is that clients want to stay with the provider. So that's number one. And I think that that will give you a little bit of ease in your heart about like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid to start on my own. How am I going to get clients? Well, many of your clients are going to want to come with you, right? That makes sense. So after you've had that conversation, we want to make sure you're ready for business. How the heck are you going to see clients? Do you have video software set up, right? If you're with a group practice or a tech company, you may have been relying on them for all of the nuts and bolts of a private practice. So now you have to make it on your own. The great news here is that you have practice being clinically, what's the word I'm looking for? Like good. Good is the word I'm looking for. You have practice being good at therapy online. So you've already done the hard part. All the rest of this is just details, okay? You're going to need some software. You're going to need something to run video with. You probably want to have an EHR. And, in the beginning, I use just like a docs on my computer and just password protected and encrypted and did all of the things. But most of us are going to want to have an EHR. There are many wonderful options out there for you, and we can talk about those as well. The big thing to be thinking about is, do you want an EHR that is all or most inclusive? meaning they include things like video with the EHR, or maybe even phone, or maybe even the ability to record sessions to show to your supervisor. They might have payment processing. They might have a portal so that you can communicate with your clients in a HIPAA protected way. So you think about, do I want to piecemeal together all of the software that I'm going to need? Do I want to get everything individually so I have the greatest choice, but probably the highest workload in choosing each product? Or do I want to do something in the middle? I'll go with an EHR that has most of the other software that I need, but I'll piecemeal together the things that that particular EHR might not have. So you can choose between those three options. I love an all-in-one or a mostly in one. I don't want to have to pick out the individual software for every little thing. But the benefit of picking individual things is that usually you can get it for less money. So if you're on a budget, sometimes it serves you to choose things individually. I would still go with at least something that includes most of the things, because headache city, and you can get some EHRs that include most of the things for really reasonable amounts. All right, so let's go to the second piece here. Hardware. You don't need a lot of stuff to run an online therapy practice. You need to have some sort of camera to be able to record you. Right now, I'm just using the one that is in my computer already. When I was working off of my laptop, I just used the one that came with my laptop. If you want to get fancy pants and you want to buy a Logitech camera, for example, their 910s are really good. If you want to buy a camera, you can totally do that, and you can attach it to your computer system. One thing that I really do like about the cameras that come with is, like, right now I'm looking at myself on the screen and it looks like I'm looking at you to you. Whereas with some of the cameras that you attach above, it sits so much higher, unless you can figure out how to not do that, that I would have to look up, not at my patient, in order to look like I'm looking at them in the eyes. So I like the built-in cameras. If I was, making courses or something like that, I might go with an upgrade. But for therapy sessions, I think that this is fine. You're going to need a phone, obviously, and a reasonable background. You do not have to have a separate phone. You can use your regular phone. Most of us are going to, ooh, what's happening here? I don't know. Let's pause. We're resuming. I have no idea what it's doing. It's doing weird stuff. Most of us are going to have a regular cell phone anyway, and we're going to use a voice over IP for our phone service. And all that means, y'all, is it's like a software for phone that lives on your phone, and we'll want to get a HIPAA protected voice over IP. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. Don't let the fancy words throw you. And then, of course, we want a reasonable background. So if I was doing therapy sessions, I wouldn't have my planning board behind me. That's pretty distracting. I might not even have books behind me for some of my clients, because they might read into it because of the kind of work that I do. But, just something that is clean, that is easy on the eyes, and is not distracting. I do really recommend, even if you're in a small space, that if you're in a situation where your bed or a bed is behind you, that you just get some sort of like folding screen or something to put behind you. I think that that's at least for me, like, starts to border on way too damn casual. And we want to come across like the professionals that we are. So very, very little hardware. And then, of course, we're going to need some paperwork. And I think that this is where therapists get really overwhelmed, and you don't have to. It doesn't have to be a whole big thing, right? So you're going to need your informed consent. And you can buy that from people like myself or Kate and Katie. I think Allison Per Year probably has some paperwork. Tamara Howell has paperwork. We all have paperwork that you can use. I even have on my website, if you go to amberlida.com and you go to the informed consent, you can see the outline for free of everything that's in the paperwork if you just want to make your own from scratch. So whatever financial situation you're in, it does not have to be a big deal. The other cool thing is that most EHRs come with paperwork templates. So for free, you're going to get, the mass of their research already done for you in the EHR. What I do recommend, and I know that this part is not fun, is that you print out all of the legal codes that apply to you. And just quick tip, just email your board and say, could you please link me to, this is my degree, this is my license type, could you please link me to all of the regulations or codes that apply to the practice of psychology or mental health counseling or whatever. That way, you know that you've got everything. Print them out. I know they're super boring. I know it's legalese, but sometimes they're going to have some stuff in there. And there's usually, my experience is there's usually like two things you'll need to adapt from any sort of template or pre-made informed consent that you get, because our states have slightly different wording around certain things, and we need that wording to be accurate in our paperwork. And sometimes our professional ethics have something that's a little bit different than others. I'll give you two examples. So in various states, the way that they define when you can involuntarily hospitalize somebody, the language is a little different. So I was practicing in North Carolina, I was practicing in Florida, and the wording that they used was like very, very small, but different. One was like immediate risk, and one was immediate risk of death. I'm making shit up here. Immediate risk of death and like imminent risk of severe harm, something like that. But they were different, right? So I want to have that written exactly as the law says in my consent. So really, like, it's not a lot of stuff. The place in ethics that I see that is a little bit different is that some of us are required, based on our professional ethics, to have something in our informed consent that shows clients how they could file a complaint against us, like goes through the details, links to the website, that kind of thing. So all of us will have just two or three things that might be subtle differences, but important differences that we need to cover in our paperwork. So if it were me, I would buy paperwork or use the paperwork in my EHR, or I would buy paperwork and use the EHR and combine the two. Then I would print out my legal codes and my ethical codes. I know it's boring. Spend 2 hours, read through them with a highlighter, see if there's anything specific that you need to change. All right, your privacy policy is available for you for free on the internet. So you can go to, oh boy, I should have pulled this up before I had to think about it. I believe it is, if you Google HIPAA privacy policy therapy, you're going to have a template come up for you. And there are going to be like 3 or 4 templates. One's for medical providers, one's for therapists, various others. Pick the one closest to your degree type. It is editable. So for example, in the one that I use, I just had to edit out some lines that wouldn't apply to me at all, like giving CPR or something. I was like, mental health, that's never going to happen. I can wipe that one out, right? So just pull out what's not applicable for you. Make sure that you have your legal business name on that document, and you're good to go. So you don't have to get fancy on that. And then the good faith estimate, I would recommend that you go to your professional body's website. So like the APA, the American Psychological Association, all of our ethics boards, all that I know of, have created templates for this, and they have a lot more money for lawyers than you're going to have. So I would take their template and use that, and I would get it from my board. Okay. I have in my course all of the templates that I use to do risk assessment, to schedule, to like script out how I'm going to handle free consultations so that they'll convert into paying clients, how I run my biopsychosocial intake, what I do in my progress notes that's specific to telehealth, all of that good stuff. That's all in the step-by-step course that I run. So if you want more information on that, let me know. Okay, the last piece, the second to last piece is your policies. Yes, good. Oh, thank you for that note, Carol. I appreciate that. So let's talk policy. The good news here is that your informed consent is like 90% of your policies. So if you're thinking, oh, I need to make a policy and procedure manual, you really don't. That's something that we do when we work in an agency and there are, 30 people and we all need to be doing the same thing. I personally like to have a little policies in my back pocket because it just makes me feel like if I ever needed to prove why I did a thing, I could be like, because this is my policy and I thought about it ahead of time, right? But most of our policies are covered in our informed consent. Confidentiality and when we might have to breach it, when we would involuntarily hospitalize, when we might charge for a no-show or late cancellation, what HIPAA is and how we are protecting folks with regard to HIPAA or GDPR, depending on where you are. So most of your policies and procedures are covered in your informed consent. Yay! There are a few things that you might want to think about that could serve you well, and I go into depth in this in the course. I should tell you this, side note, there's sort of a stack with anybody who does what I do, who trains people to build a therapy practice or an online practice or to market to private pay clients, etc. What we usually do is we have some free stuff that's available to you. We have some low cost stuff that's available to you. And then if you need deeper help, we have some higher cost stuff. So in the case of starting a practice, I have the Get It Going checklist, which is totally free for you. And I can drop that link when we're done recording. I have a workbook that's 50 pages that's all about how to set up an online therapy practice. And we're getting that set up on the back end if you want to purchase that. And if you want a higher level of support, the step-by-step program is right for you. So the reason that I thought of that is when we talk about scope of practice, there are lots of exercises that we do in the workbook and in the course to help you define your scope. I'm going to just very quickly go over that with you. So as a private practice, a solo private practice person, you're going to have a lot less time and bandwidth, likely, to handle lots of emergencies. You're going to be in session. So it's very difficult to pick up the phone and find out that somebody's in crisis, much less have time to respond to it. So most of us use our scope of practice to make sure that we are controlling the level of risk, the frequency of risk, the acuity, the chronicity, the blah, 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 blah. We use our free consult to make sure that we're getting people matched up with the level of care that they need. And when I was working in a university counseling center, we could see people with moderate level of care needs because there were a lot of us working and we had an after-hours crisis response plan. In a solo private practice, I can't do all the things for all the people. And so I contain the level of risk in the people that I bring into my practice because I know that I can't provide that level of care. I can't be available at the level that they would need me to be available. So that's one piece that I think about in my scope of practice. I think about like, okay, so is this a high acuity situation that they're going to need lots of help immediately? Because that's not going to be a good match for what I have available to offer. Is this somebody who has more chronic risk factors? Because again, as a solo practice owner, I'm not going to be able to meet those needs, right? So I want you to think about those things. We don't make decisions based on, so when you write your scope of practice, I want you to be really thoughtful about giving indicators of level of risk as opposed to like, I don't work with this diagnosis because I don't like working with this diagnosis. That will break ADA, the American with Disabilities Act. If you aren't competent to treat particular diagnoses, that's totally different. But if you're words, they're just eluding me today. If you're prejudicing against a particular person because of a diagnosis, that can get you in some big trouble. So make sure that you are clear about what your competence is in terms of your training and your experience, and also what the level of care needs might be, which you can describe in very different ways than just diagnosis. Okay, so these are just a few of the things that you want to think ahead of time about. I also have a document that I call the Cover Your You Know What thought doc. That I use to think through situations where I'm feeling compelled to break my own policies. So I meet with somebody in a free consult and I'm like, I know that this person does not fit within the boundaries that I've created for my practice, but I really like them and they really like me and I really want to help them and I really think I can help them. And so I'm thinking about bending my own darn rules. This thought doc takes me through what ethical standards I might need to think about, what legal issues I might need to think about, what people have said that I've consulted with about this issue, etc. I just go through all of our bosses basically on this worksheet to make a firm decision that's grounded in thinking instead of just feeling. So that's something I created for myself. It's really easy to create. You can just create it based on what I just said. If you're in the step-by-step course, you get it for free. And then the last piece that I want to talk about here is if you need me to talk more about HIPAA, let me know in the comments because I can talk to you more about that. The last step here is just to breathe. It is not that hard to start your own practice. It's not that hard, y'all. So please make sure that you don't let the fear of doing the thing get in the way of you doing the right thing for you. If you need some support around transitioning away from a group practice or a tech company for whatever reasons, including the news that we just talked about, we can support you. So, the Online Therapist Group is a free Facebook group for therapists, and we help you to create and to grow your online therapy practice for totally free. You can get the Get It Going checklist. I'll link that in just a little bit, which is also a free step by step of the things that you need to think about in building a private practice online. If you've got questions, I'm just going to check the chat real quick to see if there's anything else that we need to talk about. Somebody says, for me, there's also, let's pull this up. For me, there's also differences across state lines on when a minor holds, yes, holds their own consent. So important verbiage for sure. Yes. Yeah, the age changes. And so that is really important. We've had some situations come up around that. It is really important. And if you're seeing people across multiple states, remember that your informed consent needs to contain. So here's how I did mine. Do yours however you want. I had all of the informed consent that worked across all of the states that I was licensed in at the top of the 10-page document, like towards the forward part. And then where things started to get different for each state, I just had like, okay, North Carolina, here are the differences. Florida, here are the differences. Missouri, here are the differences. And then they would just initial the ones that were applicable to them based on the state that they were living in. That way we didn't have to have a different informed consent for every client just based on what state they were in. So that was super duper helpful. Alrighty, I think that's it for this morning. I just want you to really pay attention when you work with a tech company, or even, I've shared this story so many times, y'all. I worked for this amazing boss. I will never have anything bad to say about this person, in an amazing counseling center. And something came up where a client was asking for their records. And when they explained why they wanted their records, it made really good sense. Like, seemed like a reasonable request. I know none of us are excited to share the records because we're like, oh, geez, did I write appropriately? Like, are they going to understand the psychobabble gobbledygook that I put in here? You know, is this going to affect them in any way? So I had those feelings, but from the client perspective, I thought this makes sense. I talked with my boss about it, and my boss was like, no go. Our policy is we only share summaries. And I was like, oh, okay. So I tell my client that, and my client pushes back, and it's like, no, I want the whole of the records. And now I'm like, uh-oh, I don't know what to do here. And her rationale made so much sense that I decided to look at the state law, which I should have done from the get-go. But I think that we assume that if we're working for a company bigger than ourselves, that they're smarter than us and that they will have created policies that are well researched and aren't just serving the agency, but are also serving the clients, right? So I researched, and lo and behold, in this particular state, the records belong to the client. And the only reason you wouldn't share the records is if there was something in them that could be harmful, in which case you could redact that particular part. So it turned out that our policy was not in line with what the law said. And this has happened over and over and over again in places that I've worked. And it's certainly going to happen, particularly with companies that, how can I put this? If you've got a healthcare company, right? Nope, that's not even true. If you've got a medical provider, that medical provider is thinking through their policies and procedures with the client in mind and with the legal and ethical issues that surround that type of care. But the bigger the company gets, the more there are other and competing interests involved, right? And so you can begin to see policies start to develop that maybe aren't quite so in touch with the legal and ethical standards of our professions, because it's not the company's profession, right? It's our profession. We are responsible for covering our own behinds, right? So I think that it's really important, summary statement here, for everybody to do their own work. Read your legal codes and your ethics codes. I do it every single year. It's boring as heck, but I look to see, are there any updates? Am I remembering this stuff? Let me highlight it. I might watch Netflix while I do it, but I do it because I want to know the answer myself to these questions. I don't want to go into a Facebook group and have people who haven't looked at their ethics codes in 40 years weighing in on what's right and what's not right. So cover your heinies, do your own research into your legal and ethical requirements. Make sure that you are protecting your license and your practice. And if you choose to work with an agency, a group practice, tech company, more power to you, but you gotta read their terms and services. You need to read your contract with them and read the terms and services they give to clients. They might call them consumers. Read those as well to see if those will match up with the paperwork you would have given. Because in many cases, in the last 3 years, I can go to a lot of these companies and read the terms and services that they're giving to consumers, and it blatantly goes against our ethics in legal codes. So it is really important that not only do you read what they give to you in the contract, but also what they're giving to the client to make sure that that lines up with your personal legal and ethics codes. Okay, I hope that that was helpful. I don't mean to fearmonger in any way. If you need some support moving away from wherever you're working into a private practice, we are here for you with free, low price, medium price, high price, and all the levels of support that you could possibly need. Drop any questions you have in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. And as I mentioned at the very start, if you're watching this not live, please make sure not to comment things out of emotions. I'm looking over to the side because I'm trying to find, this is what I'm looking for. Oh, that was already up. Don't comment coming from emotions in a way that's going to set you or me, up for legal action. Be thoughtful about what you say. And if you have a question that you need to ask privately, you can reach out to me at dramberlida@gmail.com. All right, friends, I will talk to you soon. Bye.